Jerr Boschee, who has an extraordinary career as a social entrepreneur and a writer and a thinker and an institution builder, executive director of the Institute for Social Entrepreneurs in the United States, one of the founders of the National Gathering for Social Entrepreneurs, and also a leading light in the Social Enterprise Alliance. He has an extraordinary career going back 30 years near enough in the field, and is truly one of the founding fathers of social enterprise thinking. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Jerr Boschee.
Thank you, Alex. All right, everybody take a deep breath, let it out. It's late in the day. And I really appreciate you're all staying around this long. David's going to appreciate it even more when he follows me. I applaud you for being here. It's really a joy for me to be here because, as Alex said, I've been in this field for more than 25 years now, and I've got to tell you, it hasn't always been pleasant. I can recall just 10 years ago in my home community of Minneapolis, speaking to a group of 50 CEOs of nonprofit organizations who had come to hear something about this oxymoron, social entrepreneurship, that nobody really knew much about then. And I wasn't 20 minutes into the presentation when a woman rose from the back of the room and stalked directly toward me. As she walked, she had a big yellow legal pad in her hand, and she was writing in a flare pen on it. She reached the front of the room and smacked it down on the table and walked out of the room. I walked over and picked it up, looked at it, and I read it to the group. It said, "This is the most evil thing I have ever heard." Now that wasn't an unusual reaction. For almost 18 years, I traveled the United States and the UK and elsewhere talking about merging mission and money, and I was lucky if people were polite to me. They really didn't want to hear about it. It felt like making money off the backs of the poor, or sacrificing quality to achieve some financial bottom line, or creating a two-tiered delivery system where you only serve those who can afford to pay. There were a lot of reasons why people resisted this. And if the person I'd been 30 years ago working at a center for the physically challenged had been confronted by the person I am today, I hope I would have been polite, but that's all I would have been. Everything seemed anathema to me. It didn't make any sense at all. So who am I to talk about this after all this time? Well, I'm not an academic. Although I do have a graduate degree in ancient and modern drama, which has come in handy. 7 years ago, I sat down at the National Theatre in London, started talking to the woman next to me, and married her 16 months later. So it pays off. Academia does pay off. I'm a failed entrepreneur. More on that later. I'm a former Peace Corps volunteer, and I was also an executive for a Fortune 100 company. So I was trying first to do good, and then I was trying to do well, and all I succeeded in doing was confusing myself. Now I'm a recovering nonprofit CEO. But through it all, I think what I've been best at, or people tell me I've been best at, is being a listener, and being a storyteller, and being a coach. And for the last 25 years, I've been living in 3 of the spaces that Muhammad Yunus talked about last night. I've not been living in the space most of the people presenting at this conference have been living in, where they are founders starting up an organization, and they don't care if it's earned income or foundation money or somebody's borrowed money or the government or whoever starts it. They don't care, as long as they can get it started. That's not the world I've lived in. The world I live in is when you begin trying to cover some of your costs through earned revenue. Maybe 100% of your costs, maybe making a profit, levels 2, 3, and 4 that Muhammad was talking about. And when you do that, you run into the most cold-hearted animal in the world, the marketplace. And the rules are different. I was fortunate, though. I started this journey many, many years ago with the opportunity to travel for 3 years around the United States and meet some of the pioneers in the field, people who had started not social entrepreneurial activities, but social enterprises that were engaging with the commercial marketplace. People like John Durand, who started in 1968 with $100, 14 adults who were developmentally disabled, a circular saw, and a sewing machine. And when he retired 29 years later, he was running a $68 million not-for-profit business and 98.5% of his revenue was earned, and he employed more than 600 people who were developmentally disabled. Or people like Mimi Silbert, who in 1976 moved into a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco with her lover, 2 sons, and 10 ex-convicts, all in the one-bedroom apartment. Today, the Delancey Street Foundation runs 24 separate businesses. They've re-entered 12,000 people into the mainstream, all ex-drug addicts, ex-prostitutes, ex-cons. 12,000 people over that period of time. They've never taken a dollar of government support. All of their expenses are paid from the profits of those 24 businesses. Or Hugh Westbrook and Esther Cauliflower, a minister and a nurse in a church in Miami in 1976. One member of the congregation said, "My father is dying." It's a very undignified process. They're doing everything to hook him up to one wire after another. Can't we do something differently? Hospice care was pretty much unknown in the United States. They turned over the basement of the church as a hospice center for this one man. Other members of the congregation came and said, "We would like that too." Pretty soon they had a not-for-profit. Eventually they had a for-profit. They wrote the national legislation to change the way it was reimbursed. Venture capitalists invested, led them down a garden path. They bought the company back, hunkered down, grew it again according to their mission. And today they're a $350 million business, and they've served 135,000 families. Or Jim Boyle and Laura Sweeney, who were educators in Chicago, tired of the dropout rate. 53% of the kids who start high school in Chicago don't finish. So they left the system, set up their own schools. They took potential dropouts identified by the school district, set them down in front of a computer 20 years ago with a 10-to-1 teacher-student ratio, insisted those kids demonstrate 90% mastery in every subject. These were potential dropouts. 85% of them made it, which meant the dropout rate went down 85% in that school district. They're now in 47 school districts around the United States. Or Margaret Cosette, who started in a very small town in Missouri, trying to find out 30 years ago what elderly people needed to remain in their homes. Thought it was health care. It wasn't. It was cooking, cleaning, grooming, that sort of thing. Got a $4,000 grant, started 6 people helping these individuals. Today, there are 600 people working to help 2,000 elderly people stay out of nursing homes, and they've been profitable for 12 years. And they've now taken it to scale by merging with 7 similar organizations in other states, and they're about to do an initial public offering in the United States. There are hundreds of people like this that I've worked with over the years. You can find out about some of them. You can get a free copy of this in the reception if you want. There are 14 stories in that book. If they run out, you can download it for free from my website. All these people who have started with almost nothing and dropped their paper on the floor and picked it up and continued without a break. I have been listening to these people for a quarter of a century now. They've taught me a lot of lessons. These are people who have already gone where most of you are going to be going. I'd like to share with you some of the lessons that they've taught me in the hope you won't have to make all the same mistakes that they made. But some of what I say may cause you discomfort, because the rules are different when you begin to engage with the market. It's not the same thing as we've had before. I want to give you 5 reasons why they're doing it, 8 basic principles, and 15 critical success factors that they've identified over the years. And I'm going to do it quickly. Never fear. Most of these organizations were not startups. They had grown already as nonprofit organizations to be multi-service, multifaceted organizations. Why would they want to do this sort of thing? Well, they wanted to become more sustainable. You see, I draw a distinction between sustainability and self-sufficiency. Sustainability can be achieved with a 3-legged stool of philanthropy, government, and earned revenue. Self-sufficiency can come only through earned revenue alone, the 100% or beyond level that Mohammed was talking about. But most of these organizations, when they started thinking about earned revenue, got the surprise of their lives. The last thing they expected was that they would have to do fewer things. But organized abandonment became the watchword of the day, something Peter Drucker has been preaching for 15 years, and I've been teaching for just about as long. Helping organizations become more focused on what they do best. Stop trying to be all things to all people. Focus on the things that they do best, selectively add new programs, and even though Drucker says the one thing nonprofits have to do is learn how to kill programs, My friends tell me not to use that four-letter word, kill, so I talk about learning how to productively dispose of programs, either by passing them off to other organizations that are better positioned to deliver those services, not just to the market, but to the people, the end users, or to allow them to die a natural death if they're no longer needed, as is many times the case. But the second outcome, beyond focus, believe it or not, is expanded impact. Despite the fact that they have fewer programs, at the same time, they are penetrating each area of need more deeply and serving more people. And I've seen that happen over and over and over again. And the third, I'm going to come back to the third in a minute, is a changed organizational culture. As I say, I'll come back to that in a minute. The fourth, I want to pick up on something that Lee and others said over here and that I heard Nick say earlier today. If you are not completely self-sufficient, you are going to be dependent continually on government and on corporate largesse and the like. But who's supposed to lead us in addressing social needs? We heard it last night. It's not going to be corporations. It's not going to be the government. It has to be civil society that leads us to address these problems. And how can we genuinely, all the time, speak truth to power when we are dependent upon the people who hold the purse strings? We can do that sometimes, but not every time. The more self-sufficient we become, the more we can speak truth to power. And then there's the money reason, of course, increasing financial self-sufficiency. But let's be real about this, folks. Many of the examples I gave you, many others like them, are the ones everybody writes about and we hear about, but those are rare. I believe every NGO in the world can generate more earned revenue than it's currently generating. I've never found one that could not. And they can start doing it right away, but they got to change who they are. They got to change the way they think about themselves, the people they serve, the way they deliver the services, all of that. Some can actually get to that 100% cost recovery level, but it's going to take them 3, 5, 7 years to get there. And a very few can go to the profitability level, to go to scale, whatever you want to call that. And it's going to take 7 to 10 years. And that's not Jerr saying that. MIT studied 814,000 small businesses and tracked them for 10 years and found that significant revenue didn't flow until the 7th year. And by then, the entire product line had changed at least once. It's a balancing act now. We're going to go, those are the outcomes. Those are the 5 outcomes. And now I want to go into some of the basic principles. Some of them are obvious. We've talked about them. Number one is this double bottom line that we've been talking about, or the triple bottom line. The market is very tempting. A lot of the people who've been down this path before have tipped off into the wrong direction, and you wind up seeing them on expose television just as often, and probably more often sometimes than corporate raiders. And they treat them more roughly because they think these guys should have known better. They don't, I guess, have that expectation of the corporate raiders. I don't know. That's the first basic principle, is the double bottom line. The second is core competency. So many nonprofits in the United States tried to start what we call unrelated business ventures, unrelated to their mission, trying to find a cash cow to support the mission. And they almost all failed because it's a double whammy. They're trying to start a business which they don't know how to do, and they're trying to do it in an arena they know nothing about. So at least we can get rid of that second and learn some of the skills and maybe have a chance to pull these enterprises up. Remember, I'm talking about market engagement now. It's a very different kind of world. So core competencies are important. But the third principle is you don't have to be somebody who starts an actual enterprise to be successful at this sort of thing. To get to sustainability, you don't have to reach 100%. You just have to cover as much of your costs as you can through earned revenue. Too many people look at the end of the road and think that's the only worthwhile destination. But there are other destinations, the second and third level that Mohammed was talking about, that are equally honorable and desirable. About 10 years ago, some experimenters at a university in the East Coast of the United States did an experiment with monkeys. They had a room about this big, empty room except for a pole in the middle of the room. They put 4 monkeys into the room. There was a bunch of bananas at the top of the pole. One of the monkeys ran over, scurried up to get the bananas, but before he could reach out to get them, the people running the experiment doused him with ice-cold water out of a jet in the ceiling. He squealed and ran back down. Twice more he tried, same thing happened. The other monkeys tried, same thing happened. They gave up. 2 days later, the researchers put a new monkey in the room, one new monkey, and took one of the old ones out. New monkey, saw the pole, ran over there. What happened? The other 3 monkeys ran over and dragged him away. Wouldn't let him go up the pole. Over the next 6 days, they gradually replaced each of the original monkeys with a new one. Each time they put a monkey in there, he saw the pole, ran over, the other 3 dragged him away. By the end of 6 weeks, there were 4 monkeys in that room. Not one of them had ever gone up that pole, and not one of them knew why. That, folks, is an organizational culture. That is the single greatest obstacle to social entrepreneurship within an existing organization. Yes, it may be more difficult in an organization that's been around for 30 or 40 years, but those of you who've started these projects and have grown them for 5 or 7 years, you're building a bureaucracy whether you want to admit it or not, and that culture is going to have to change. That means you're going to have to be taking some risks that you haven't taken before. You've all taken risks. I'm talking about risks in the marketplace, the commercial marketplace. Sometimes we don't even know what a risk is. I mean, last year, worldwide, 15 people were killed by sharks. Don't go in the water, right? 150 people were killed by coconuts falling on their heads. Don't walk under the coconut trees. It's the life we live in. So take some risks, live by the rules of business, which means you don't go chasing after a grant just because you're not making your numbers. No. You do what you need to do to be viable as a social enterprise. And you'd be surprised how often you can be viable if you don't have that safety net hanging out there. Make some tough choices about some of your staff people. Some of your staff people, your most loyal ones, won't understand the market. And if they understand it, they won't buy into it. And even if they buy into it, they may not have the skills to live in that marketplace. You're going to have to do some compassionate outplacement with those people for everybody's benefit. You're also going to have to open up your control systems and get the decision-making down to the street, which is a value that you all have already, but it gets harder and harder to do the more bureaucracy is added. You're going to have to learn how to kill programs, and oddly enough, you're going to have to learn how to make money. And for people to be comfortable making money. The people who are the most uncomfortable in the U.S. are the corporate executives who sit on nonprofit boards because they park their business hat at the door. And they say, we did well over there, we're here to do good, we don't want the two to mix. I've had people sit there and look right at a great market opportunity and walk away, because that's not why we joined this board. We're here to do good instead, not to do well. We did 9 demonstration projects at the National Center in the United States in the mid-90s for about a 5-year period. Took 65 nonprofits through an 18-month process of cultural change, getting ready to get ready, because the attitudes are so embedded. And I'll invite you later in your folders, there's a page called Crossing the Cultural Divide. It shows the traditional for-profit mentality, the traditional nonprofit mentality, and the hybrid mentality in each of 21 categories that we need to begin moving toward. The 5th basic principle is one that I'm told resonates most with audiences because they come and tell me afterwards. And that is that there is a very great difference between an innovator, an entrepreneur, and a professional manager. Innovators are the dreamers. We create the prototypes. We work out the kinks, and then we get bored, and we move on. We've got 12 programs going on at once. I learned about 30 years ago that I was not an entrepreneur, and it came as a huge relief to me. Because I was always feeling guilty about not following through on all my wonderful ideas. And many of them were wonderful, right? That's about the time the entrepreneur takes over and takes a prototype or a program that works and turns it into a going concern. Because knowing how a program runs is not the same thing as knowing how to run the business that runs the program. It's a very different set of skills. And eventually the entrepreneur gets bored, and the professional manager comes and installs the structures and the protocols and all the rest to make sure the going concern keeps going. And a healthy organization has all three. But too often, you've got an innovator trying to be an entrepreneur or a manager trying to be an innovator, and people come to me and say, that's why it's not working at my organization, or that's why it's not working for me, because I'm trying to do something that I'm not cut out to do. So the 3 different kinds of leaders at different times in the evolution of an organization. The 6th basic principle is that many of these social enterprises eventually, sooner rather than later, need to be spun out on their own if they're going to have the maneuverability and the nimbleness they need to function in the marketplace. They can no longer be encumbered by the overall bureaucracy of the NGO or any other kind of a parent organization. It might mean a different name, a different location, a different board, a different staff, different compensation policies. Again, 20 years of research has shown that the greater the degree of separation, the better the chance the social enterprise has to succeed. And the seventh principle is the one they were talking about here a little while ago. 75% of what you do in the social enterprise world is going to fail. And you have to know that going in. Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's isn't troubled by that. He just said, you know, to stumble, it's not to fall, it's just a way to move ahead more quickly. So we have to accept and celebrate failure. Some of my clients actually have mock funerals when things go wrong because they understand there are lessons to be learned. And the eighth basic principle is that there's no magic bullet. There's no template that shows you how this will work. Everything that I say or anybody else says has to be filtered through your local need sets, your own priorities, your own skills, your own resources, and especially through one person, an entrepreneur who leads the charge. There has to be that one person who makes it happen. And I think that's what Bill has found over the years with the social entrepreneurs through Ashoka. There's just no magic bullet here. It's like the Earl of Rochester once said. He said, before I was married, I had 6 theories about raising kids. Now I got 6 kids and no theories. There are a lot of nightmares. A lot of nightmares. When I try to work with an organization, the first thing I do is try to depress them as much as I can about how hard this is. And I give them the long list. It's in your handouts. I'm not going to go through it now. A long list of all the things that could go wrong, and in an hour they can double the list. But they've also, over the years, taught me some key lessons about what can happen to overcome those obstacles. 15 critical success factors. Told you I'd talk about my failed entrepreneurship. 25 years ago, went to California with 2 friends, moved from Minnesota to California, got in a closed loop of excitement about our business idea. We were so excited about it. We packed everything up, sold our homes, and moved off. Meanwhile, 2 other people were in our orbit, so to speak, who'd already run successful small businesses. And while we were doing this, you know what they were doing. They were rolling their eyes. We didn't have a very good idea. We didn't have a market for it. We didn't have the right management team. We had no plan. We didn't have any finances. All we really had was the desire to move to California, which is what we had done. And then I came crawling back home 7 months later when it didn't work. Thinking I could do more and more of what I knew how to do would make up for all the things I did not know how to do. Well, what was lacking? The first critical factor, candor. It's in very short supply in the entrepreneurial world because we all believe that every idea we come up with is the greatest thing since apple butter. We all have delusions of adequacy. We need to overcome these delusions and put a mantra on the wall that says, beware of yourself. Put it over the wall every morning. And the second, I had a social entrepreneurial friend, it was about 10, 12 years ago, sitting at lunch with me, and I was talking about all these wonderful things I was going to do, and he got tired of it, and he said, just to stop for a minute. I said, what? He said, no matter what you do, you got to remember one thing. I said, what? He said, whatever you do, you got to make sure it's nutritious. I said, what? But what they were talking about was the passion that we've been hearing about since last night. If social enterprise is not the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning and drives you through the day, forget it. Don't even try it. I mean, I know that's why these people have all started their social entrepreneurial activities. Going on to the next stage is a whole different kind of ballgame. And they better love that too. Because if they don't, they're going to run into a brick wall. Third, got to be clear about why you're doing it. What are the driving forces? In the U.S., they're pretty clear. Costs are going up for nonprofits. Resources are going down. There are, compared to 25 years ago, for every 2 nonprofits that existed then, there are 5 today, all squabbling over the same money and all looking at each other in a very carnivorous way, by the way, today, much more so than before. There are so many more needs out there. Why are we doing it? And also, part of clarity is what do we hope to get out of it? You have to quantify some long-term goals before you start, or you're just wandering in the woods. Fourth, you've got to have sufficient resources. Seems obvious, but put the word sufficient in quotes. Because sometimes it's a dollar bill, and sometimes it's $10 million. Sometimes it's a building, sometimes it's a bicycle. And only you know what those resources are, but if you don't have them, it's useless. Fifth, they mentioned it before, I've seen a number of organizations plan this very well and very carefully. Get everything in order, come to the edge of the cliff, and then back away. They cannot summon the organizational or the personal courage or commitment to do this. But Apollinaire had a short poem, and I've seen it work. He said, come to the edge, he said. We can't. We're afraid. Come to the edge, he said. We can't. were afraid. Come to the edge, he said. They came, he pushed them, and they flew. And that kind of courage is something that you can draw from other people, that people can lend to you, that your team together can make happen. Because even though one person has to lead this team, that person cannot be in this alone. We all know that. And how do you balance mission and money? The sixth principle that I found, the sixth critical factor over time, is you've got to have core values. Not 10 operating principles or 20 operating principles that you find on the wall of a lot of nonprofits, but the 3 things you will never compromise about. When Jerry Porras and Jim Collins wrote Built to Last, they tracked industries in the United States and found the #1 company always had 3 or 4 written core values that dictated everything that they did. And the 7th one, it goes back to what Charlie was talking about this morning, the difference between propulsion and attraction. We've got to have market pull. When you go into the marketplace, you can't push your way in there. You can't start with what you're already doing and expect to go out and have somebody buy it. You've got to go out there and find out what somebody needs and build what they need, and then they'll pull you into the market. And if you go back to your sites and find yourself trying to convince yourself or anybody else you have a good idea for a business, you probably don't, because the good ideas will not require convincing. They may not all be good ideas for your organization, but they'll be good ideas, and you can eliminate 90% of the chaff if you just remember the difference between market pull and market push. Always start with them, not with your own organizations. My clients tell me they get it, and I come back a month later and they're saying, our plan, our budget, our building, our needs, our staff, it's all inside out again instead of outside in. 8th critical factor, being willing to plan. Now, let's not let our eyes glaze over too far. Planning can be important, and by planning I mean at least 2 or 3 things at the beginning of the process. Ask for help, not from people like me, but from individuals in your communities who have already built successful small businesses. They've been down the road of enterprise, and they will help you along the road to social enterprise by telling you the truth and giving you a reality check that you can't buy from anybody else. And put one person in charge. Don't try to level this across a lot of people. Find the right person and let them have reign to go do this. And thirdly, let yourself be stupid. Let yourself play with the ideas. Better let the ideas play with you, because it's the stupid ideas that lead to the good ideas. And if you don't pause long enough to let them play with you, you'll never get to the good ideas. The 9th is to stop trying to be all things to all people once you enter the marketplace. You need to have a niche mentality. You need to be good somewhere. You need to be strong enough to carve out a niche that you can defend and still make your profit or cover your costs within that. And if you're trying to do too many things, you will not be able to accomplish that. And number 10, be a player or don't play at all. Be #1 or #2 in whatever market you're entering, or get out of it. That's what Peter Drucker told Jack Welch to do when GE was in the tank 23 years ago. The only piece of advice he gave Welch was, if you're not #1 or #2 with any of those 300 products out there that have General Electric on them, kill the products. And that's what he did. And that's what Drucker's been preaching to the sector as well since 1991 when he set up his own foundation, 89. Number 11, very tough one for people who are raised with a social mentality, and that's aggressive pricing. You've got to be able to recover your annualized costs, not just your unit costs. But today, almost everybody who contracts with us out of the government and foundations and elsewhere will cover your unit costs, but not your other costs. And you're going to have to start an educational process. In the for-profit sector, an average service company charges a 50% markup in order to have a 3 to 5% net margin at the end of the year. And I know that sounds uncomfortable, but you're going to have to, if you're going to play in the market, and it's not for everybody, you're going to have to live by the market's rules. And you're going to have to build the right team. 4 out of 5 small businesses in the United States fail in the first 3 to 5 years. But 6 out of 7 started by graduates of the Harvard Business School succeed. Not because they're any smarter, because we're looking for street smarts. They succeed because they know how dumb they are. And the first thing they do is they assemble a team to help them. The leader has to be an entrepreneur. The rest of the team doesn't have to be. And the leader has to have 2 kinds of entrepreneurial backgrounds. It's best if they've already done it once before and you can lure them over to help run your social enterprise. It's better if they've got experience in the field you're going into. In this book, when I interviewed these people, one after the other said, you know, we waited till the 3rd year to hire anybody who knew anything about our business. And it was the biggest mistake we made. You've got to find some people who are experienced in the business that you're in. 13th, you've got to do strategic partnerships. We've heard enough about that already. But particularly with for-profit companies, as Jim Austin was talking about this morning. Nobody goes it alone anymore in the marketplace. Whether it's supplier partnerships, distributor partnerships, joint marketing endeavors, whatever. Nobody goes it alone. You've also, 14th here, you got to do something. There are so many wannabe social enterprisers out there who plan and talk and talk and plan and plan and talk. They never do anything. They forget what's known as the NOAA principle. You don't get a prize anymore for predicting rain. You only get a prize if you build an ark. You've got to go out there, do something, fail at it, learn something from it, do something again, fall down, pick yourself up, do it again, and keep doing it until something happens. And the last is really expressed in a phrase that Vice President Hubert Humphrey uttered many years ago in the United States when he said, things turn out best for those who make the best of the way things turn out. It's flexibility. Everything else I told you was just shaping in the field of play. Ultimately, you have to do what you have to do when you have to do it, and there's no getting around it. Well, these are the kinds of lessons the people in the field have been teaching me. But I want to say to you, I think you're wonderful. I think you people, I know all of you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes and wonder whether it's making any difference in the world. Believe me, it's making a difference. Even when it doesn't feel like it, even if it feels like you're never going to succeed at this. Mother Teresa said, God doesn't ask us to succeed. God only asks us to try. And you people have been trying, and the people I know have been trying for 25, 35 years. I want to leave you with just 2 thoughts. First, from me, 4 things. I'd like you to care, continue to care a whole lot more than most other people in the world think is wise. I want you to dream a whole lot more than other people think is practical. Risk much more than other people think is safe. And expect a whole lot more than other people think is possible. And lastly, my wish for you, it's actually in the words of John Wesley, to do all the good you can, in all the ways that you can, in all the places you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Jerr for sharing his considerable experience and with us and inspiring us even so late in the day.